Hello my friends, welcome back to the RimWorld Restart on Death series, where, at the end of last episode, me compadres, we actually made out with quite the bountiful harvest of turrets and other different types of things after raiding the RimWorld state government. Well, in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on our very own defenses by building some large, high-security fences with barbed wire on top to prevent anyone from walking through or climbing over. But not only that, no, we're actually going to be utilizing those same turrets that we stole from the RimWorld state and adding them into our defenses with the walls, and also building, of course, some sandbags around them for added defense and cover. And for the cherry on top, we're also going to be building some barbed wire fencing around the turrets themselves, even the sandbags. That way any enemies trying to get to them will get tangled up in it, or at least that's the idea. All in all, I was pretty happy with these new defenses. I think that they are much better than what we previously had, especially in the northern section here, because it was basically wide open, and now we are expanding out further to protect ourselves, of course. I also ended up adding in some of these turrets down in the southern entrance of our base as well, where we already had plenty of spike traps and mini turrets. Those of you with a keen eye will probably notice that one specific type of turret that we're adding is actually just a searchlight. This little bad boy won't shoot or anything like that, but say we have enemies coming to attack us in the dark. What this will do, it will shine its big bright light on them and we can easily see them, thus making it easier to shoot them. You may also notice that it appears that the power is out, so it looks like we need to invest in some proper power generation. Well, currently I am playing in our Rags to Riches series as well, where we only recently got geothermal power, and I don't want to have the same issues here, so we're going to immediately begin working on that. With as small of a base as we currently have, one geothermal power generator should do us for a very long time. After all of these upgrades to our security and defenses though, the remaining mini turrets that we currently had taken from them, I decided to kind of scatter them throughout the inside of the base, just here and there, in case we have them breaking in once again with a large raid. We also had plenty of other items though, like a royal bed that I would actually install for Nivorlus and Laz, since it is very befitting of a leader. We also had a pretty good sized DNA sculpture, which was quite beautiful, and a nice harp, which we would end up installing both of those in our dining room for all to enjoy. In the meantime though, we have been producing many of our own wooden sculptures, and once again, as you well know by this point, we're doing nothing really but trading these to the dwarves and the orcs and anyone else who's willing to buy them, so we are going to be loading them up into the skip and doing just that. First and foremost, I think we'll be doing some trading with our old allies, the dwarves, but while we were out doing this, it would seem that we're being raided by a large orc tribe. Though most had very crude weapons, their numbers were indeed plentiful, and they wasted absolutely no time along with their chieftain attacking our brand new defenses, I'm afraid. Our revolutionaries rushed out into a large group to begin attacking them all, especially the chieftain in particular, who seemed to be able to take one hell of a beating without a scratch. As we attempted to shoot the chieftain in the back as much as humanly possible, we sent in Grigory to try to distract him from the front by smacking him in the face with his skeleton hands, I suppose. This would give us the opportunity, however, to use our tank as well. And he somehow even managed to tank the damage, no pun intended. We would hit him with multiple tank shells, and even our poor spirit wolves were no match. It should be noted as well, the entire time we're trying to kill this big bastard, we're also taking on his entire tribe as well. Nevertheless though, we are relentless, and we would not give up near as easy as they had hoped. At a certain point, we would begin trying to bring all of our soldiers inside though, to protect them from the onslaught of orcs. Yet one of our many strategic retreats, of course. Eventually though, we ended up getting quite lucky with a tank shell, and we killed their chieftain. As we were trying to make a retreat back into our garage where we could fight more adequately, they were also coming in on us. Using our tank for cover and our minigun for some heavy fire, we would attempt to prevent this from happening as much as possible, of course. But after many an hour of fighting and blowing them up with our tank, eventually they would begin to flee as the moon sat high in the night sky sky. The battle had finally concluded, and I am quite grateful to say that we are the victors. Not all of our attackers were that bad, though. Badly wounded, I should say, as this one here, we could tend to her wounds, what few she had, and take her into our prison to begin recruiting her. Even with the prospect of some new recruits, though, that battle was tough as hell. So much, in fact, that Loinchen actually went into a catatonic breakdown from all the stress. And worst of all yet, poor Keatster had ended up losing his life during the battle. Yet another of our friends, our soldiers, put down by a merciless and cruel enemy. Even with the frozen ground, we would still manage to dig him a very shallow but honorable grave next to our other fallen heroes. Rest easy now, my friend. The revolution shall continue in your absence, and your sacrifice shall not go in vain. As for our possible orc recruit, though, it appears that she is a woodsman, a particular type of warrior who specializes in a bow and arrow, preferring the silence and lethality of it. In other words, she is incredibly deadly, and she would also be the perfect soldier for hunting down deer for their venison in the winter. Back over at the dwarven settlement, Laz was actually doing quite a bit of trading, selling off a lot of our leathers and different types of weapons that we had actually taken from the RimWorld state before we would move on to yet another dwarven settlement, where this time around we would actually do a little bit of selling and a lot of purchasing some actual components, advanced components, yada yada yada, things that we needed for some projects, you could say. Shortly thereafter, we would end up returning home, and we ended up purchasing 5 advanced components, 11 normal components, and we even managed to make a little bit of silver. To celebrate our great victory over the orc chieftain and the orc invasion that we were facing, Fama decided to throw a party. After everything that we experienced, it was much needed. We had Nivorlis playing the harp like a mad woman all night long, and everybody was boogieing down. Lyandon and Kona Yoshimaru were placing their bets on some poker cards, and then Kona Yoshimaru won, and then Lyandon got mad and ran away. Foma himself sat at the dinner table and read a book for some reason. Oh, this is boring. Well then, we shall begin on our little project that we needed our advanced components for. We would actually end up having our undead companions begin crafting up some advanced combat armor. All in all, I was pretty darn glad with how these turned out. As for now, we only made the helmets, and we actually ended up making Lockwood a protective mask for her in particular, and this is mostly just because of how expensive these helmets are. Now, there are other pieces of this armor that we're going to work on as well in the very near future, but for now, I think this gives you a sense of what we're going for. I don't plan on giving this to all of our soldiers, as a revolution with many revolutionaries wouldn't exactly be super uniform. A little bit of time later, we had finally recruited Iroyo, which actually didn't take near as long as I thought it was going to, given the fact that she is a great warrior and a huntsman at that, but either way, welcome aboard, madam. We're glad to have yet another orc among our ranks. Immediately, we sent her into the armory to equip some appropriate weaponry, and it should come as no surprise that she ended up choosing a Nordic bow as her weapon of choice. Not only because she's quite skilled with it, but one of her abilities in particular is called the Arrow Storm, which is going to require a bow. Laz would send her out on a bit of a hunting mission where she would put these skills to good use with the Arrow Storm as well as a poison trap, and if anything like that fails, we can always just resort to the big guns, a minigun that she keeps on her back. Oh, and she knows how to use it too, by golly. Yes, indeed, I think that'll do quite nicely. She should be able to utilize her bow and minigun if she has to hunt off many animals in the area, and thus that way we can feed our growing army. This all the while everyone else is doing their jobs like research. Speaking of which, we finally finished our extensive research into geothermal power, now giving us the option to build our very first generator, of course. Thankfully, we had a steam geyser that wasn't all that far away and was actually within our high security fence around the base, making it quite convenient to build this generator and to suck the power right out of the planet. And as you can see, no issues here. We are good to go. All lights are on and they are not going off, baby. For our next research project, I wanted to start on flak armor because unlocking flak armor is actually going to unlock many of the different types of combat armor that I was talking about earlier that go with the combat helmets that we had also created. This includes, but is not limited to, many different types types of plate carriers, different types of boots and gloves, and so on and so forth. Since we've already unlocked similar technologies, I wouldn't expect this flak armor research to take all that long, but in the meantime, we would also end up tailoring a very specific mask for Simeon. Given the fact that he too is a necromancer, I think that we need a nice Reaper mask to distinguish him from our other soldiers. And besides, he was part of the state government for so long, he needs to really embrace his magical roots. For a bit of practice, I thought it might be a good idea for him to go ahead and resurrect the towering orc chieftain that we had recently killed. Luckily, it doesn't appear that his body has rotted away since he's been frozen, so he's in prime condition. Something tells me this big behemoth isn't too familiar with firearms, but I bet those two axes he's wielding would do him some good, as would a broom and dustpan, so we immediately put him back into the base to go about cleaning. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Only a few days ago he was trying to cut our heads off, and now his undead corpse is sweeping our floors. Beautiful. Finally, with our research into flak armor completed though, we could go about making many of the plate carriers and everything that we had discussed previously. Thankfully, these are not near as resource expensive as the combat helmets, so perhaps we should have started with them, but regardless, we ended up finishing 4 or 5 of these plate carriers, and I think that this is a pretty good start. They should help protect our sweet little vital parts like our heart, our lungs, and anything below the old chest cavity. Best of all, we look damn good in them. I didn't realize this until now, but I noticed that the plate carriers and combat helmets are purple just like the old samurai armor from the previous series that we saw Laz in. Perhaps this was planned, it wasn't, but it's still pretty cool. Now with that finished, our protection for our people, we need protection for our base once more, and these security fences are damn fine. They are amazing, and thus we are going to be building one around the southern section that is actually going to link up with the western section, basically our backyard where we built some defenses last episode. This would give some of the vegetation in the area plenty of time to regrow, and thus we could cut it all down and use it once more with some wooden spike traps around the front here. A little bit too uniform for my liking, but we can't get them too close together, unfortunately. We would also end up doing the same in the northern section. This way, hopefully, if our spike traps don't get them, the barbed wire will. And with that, my friends, our base is looking a lot better, much more well defended and much more secure because, well, it really is. We've never had this many turrets at all, we've never had this many spike traps, and we've never even had a wall around the entire area, so this is great. But enough is never enough, as they always say, so our next research project is once again going to be focused on security and defense in the form of IEDs, basically trip mines, essentially. While we were working on that research, we also built something of a chimney around our cooler, which I just realized in this clip is indeed backwards, unfortunately. We'll have to take care of that, but this will allow us to expel heat outward into the environment, and it won't be so easy for raiders to bust through. This is also based on a comment from our good friend Jay Cease, I believe is how you pronounce your name. This is a great idea, and I can't believe I haven't done it before, to be honest with you, but thank you. We finished up our research into IED shortly thereafter, and immediately began building some incendiary ones out in front of the base. Now, we only had enough shelves to go about building 2 of them for now, but that is a start. We can eventually build an entire minefield at some point, which would be really useful. Something else I found that would be quite useful is expanding our storage area. The old one is already walled in, so there's not really any room for expansion, unfortunately, and thus because of that, we are going to be building yet another right next to our little flight deck here. We could think of this as a backup storage room for the time being. We'll just throw in plenty of big wooden shelves, and we'll also keep our other one since it's still pretty close to our garage where we need all of our resources. That way people don't have to walk too far. As for our next research project, we're actually going to begin working on the autocannon turret, a much larger and much more powerful design. Along with this, I do have the double autocannon mod installed as well, and thus if we want to, we could build even larger ones that pack more of a punch. However, something tells me our research and building of these autocannons will not be done by the time that this siege comes from the state government, as it looks like they're already here, wading through the icy waters to set up their camp and begin bombarding us with shells. But not just any shells, it appears. they have brought anti-grain warheads. They think that these are an asset to them, but little do they know they shall be their downfall. Time for us to drop a few bombs, eh? Striking and lighting on fire these anti-grain warheads, making them detonate, would end up killing many, if not the majority, of their forces, and destroying any hope that they would ever have of creating their siege cannons, but we still had to deal with an onslaught of their soldiers. Although I must say that after summoning our spirit wolves and killing several of them, they were hardly any issue to us and they began to flee the area. Do not be mistaken though, this is going to become a common occurrence. Sieges with anti-grain warheads should be something that we expect very often in the near future. We have been poking the bear for far too long, and now the bear is going to bite. We would immediately begin our cleanup efforts, stripping those living soldiers of their gear so that we can either wear it for our protection or sell it to some of our allies, and we began hauling everything else. A lot of our victory there I will chalk up to the fact that we had some great defenses. Even though we did detonate their own warheads against them, killing the majority of them, that small force still would have done a lot of damage to us if we hadn't built up all these defenses here to protect ourselves. And because of that and the ramping up of their forces attacking us with these warheads and everything, that is why we are going to continue pushing forward and trying to expedite the process of making our defenses better and better every single day. Part of defending ourselves is not only our base and our people though, we need to also protect things like our power production. For example, of course, we have all of our solar panels inside of some walls in the base that are left unroofed, but we also need to build some walls around our geothermal power generator since it is the most crucial of all. We ended up building these walls out of granite since it is the strongest stone of all, although I think I'd like to double wall it in the future when we get some more steel and actually use some armored walls as well. By this point, we had also finished up our research into autocannons and double autocannons, which was absolutely perfect, sticking with our theme of defense, of course. And this is also why I didn't want to expend any of our steel reserves at the moment, as we needed that steel to go about building a few barriers as well as the autocannons themselves. Up in the northern section, we are going to be building some of these barricades to try and help with our protection in terms of cover during battle. The reason being, I noticed during the orc invasion of our base, we were stuck fighting near the garage, taking cover behind our tank, which was a bit too far for my liking. But with that, my friends, we are well defended, at least from a ground perspective. Anything coming at us from the sky very well may take us out if we're not careful. I think we need to try to focus heavily on shields and maybe trying to get some type of high shield that will protect the entire base from incoming objects. Speak of the devil, it would seem that our old friends are back once more to try and siege our base. You know I said a moment ago that we should expect this to become more common, but I don't think that I was expecting it to be this common. It would seem after their failed attempt last time, they just can't let it go. Bringing along with them some anti-grain warheads once again, as we well should have expected, but the problem with this is that we've used up our supply of mortar shells, and thus we're going to need to rush to make any to try and detonate theirs. But I'm afraid that this seems to be a race that we won't be able to win. They quickly threw together their siege tower and then loaded up their shells. The base was hit with the warhead, but luckily our storage room seemed to manage to keep the blast within its walls, destroying them, but luckily saving our skip. Utilizing the one single mortar that we had, we managed to hit their stack of anti-grain warheads, killing once again the majority of their forces. With this detonation, the majority of them were killed and the others would flee the area. But this was not before they had managed to fire yet another anti-grain warhead hitting the front of our base. Luckily, it didn't really do any damage except to all of our defenses here, simply eradicating some walls, spike traps of course, as well as sandbags, nothing we couldn't replace. And now that the battle was finally over, we would of course go around and start putting out all of the fires started by the warheads as well before the rest of our base burned down internally. Though I suppose I should also say that many of the undead elves and our other undead companions were struck by the blast as well. Luckily, none of our living folks were, and these 3 could be easily brought back. It's a good thing that their bodies weren't destroyed during the blast, otherwise they would have been gone forever. Later on into the evening, as night was creeping up on us, we were inspecting the siege site, and we came upon many of those still living. We began to strip them of their armor, as we thought it might be quite useful to us. We ended up providing these armors to some of our greater soldiers like Laz and Noskov, Kono Yoshimaru. Again, I realize that we're trying to stick with a more uniform look for our soldiers, or at least the majority of our soldiers, but the Cataphracts armor is just so damn good compared to any plate carrier that we could build. It would be such a waste not to use it, and of course using it for someone like Laz, who we really don't want to die, is going to be quite crucial. For the next few days, our main focus would be nothing more than repairing the walls of our base to keep out the icy, frigid temperatures from freezing us all to death, and of course by repairing our storage room and just trying to go about rebuilding what was. It is clear to us now, though, that we have a massive gap in our defenses from above, something that we shall try to fix in the next episode. Until next time, friends.